This next one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Joe B. in Erie, Pennsylvania. What do you think of Roddy Piper's performance as the Maniac on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? I personally thought he was fantastic in that role.
I loved it. I wanted to get a wrestling scene out of it, though. I was kind of disappointed when they hauled the Maniac off. What was it? The offense they got him on, where they arrested him at the end of that show.
Oh, I forget. I forget if it was child support or something else. But I love that, though. That, to me, when they haul him off and he's leaving and he's yelling out the window, I love you!
Yeah. And then the fucking best part was when Frank ends up fucking making the comeback and fucking accidentally stabs the... How did the fucking guy get stabbed where he was bleeding? Or was it a girl?
No, well, Frank, the great scene in that episode, we'll get back to Piper as the Maniac, because he had a few appearances on there, but Frank shows up in the bar when they're getting ready to do their wrestling show. His gimmick will be the trash man, and he's going to throw trash all around the ring and then start eating it. So he's the referee for the event, but then he decides, because the Maniac's gone, that Rickety Cricket, who was the Taliban guy, all of a sudden the trash man hits him with the trash can, and there's a sharp edge, and it slices his jugular.
That's the thing, because then the guy's fucking bleeding out, and fucking Frank is like, uh-oh. And they must be bigger wrestling fans than we think, because that... Every time when one of these Ring of Honor shows when I was there, or on some of the OVW shows, guys would bring in trash cans, and I would literally have them go get a fucking pair of pliers and a goddamn hammer and pull the handles off and pull the handle off the lid and the handles off the sides and hammer the sharp edges down flat so they wouldn't bust each other open. And I popped when I saw that. The fucking jugular gets sliced and the fucking blood's spurting. It was almost as good as in the $1 Million Baby Takeoff episode when Dee's on steroids and Frank is going to train her to fight. Goddamn, what was his name on Laverne and Shirley? Carmine's daughter.
That's right.
And he fucking sucker punches Carmine, and Carmine takes a fucking bump into his daughter and knocks her down, and her fucking head lands on the edge of the stool and breaks her neck, and they just slink out of the fucking ring. Anyway, where were we going with this?
Roddy Piper as the Maniac.
Roddy Piper as the Maniac. There was a couple of them, yes, but Piper was great because, I mean, he was just... He was a personality that you liked watching him do whatever the fuck he was going to do, if sometimes for no other reason than to try to figure out exactly what the fuck he was doing. But he was perfect for television. You liked to watch him. I enjoyed all that shit. For a while there, Piper was probably the best Hollywood crossover of any of the wrestlers, right? I mean, so. as we've talked about in this episode, Hollywood crossovers have been going on since the 20s and 30s with Mike Mazurki and Nat Pendleton, for fuck's sake. But Roddy, of everybody that got a movie or some kind of deal, maybe Roddy and Terry Funk, out of the 80s popularity boom, they did the best as actually legitimate actors and performers rather than just being a wrestler in a part.
Do you remember Piper's first movie?
It was Body Slam, wasn't it?
No.
It was something before. They Live was after.
The One and Only.
That's right, because they shot that in L.A. and the same thing as Mighty Joe Young, and some of the L.A. guys made cameos.
And actually, that movie, in a lot of ways, changed Roddy's life. Gene LaBelle got him into that movie, and it got him his SAG card. So as long as he kept that active, Roddy had insurance for the rest of his career through the Screen Actors Guild.
Which, by the way, since all these WWE stars are on screens, and they're obviously acting these days, why are they not in the guild?
They're doing more dialogue than ever before.
What now is the difference? before you not only could make the claim of differences, not only for the independent contractor thing in the territories when there were no written contracts, we've gone over that, but also nobody would have gone to the Screen Actors Guild to try to get involved as a wrestler because that would involve exposing the business. And not only the promoters, but the wrestlers wouldn't have done that in those days. That's why the wrestlers tried to get into TV enough to get those cards, but they wouldn't try to get in the Screen Actors Guild exclusively because we're wrestlers and we're doing this as a performance. They wouldn't say that. Now, and also there were still some differences. Now there are almost, what would the differences be between being a professional wrestler and being an actor now?
Actors are paid properly. Actors get a limousine.
No, I know.
They fly first class. What else?
I'm talking about the difference in the performance of the duties. Besides the contract that they sign, which obviously is much different than the contracts that actors sign, just cold. What's the difference between an actor taking a part in an action film, movie, television program, an action production, and being a professional wrestler now?
Well,
there's dialogue you're given by writers.
Yeah, there are big differences. Wrestlers play a character that they're given by the office, and they get a script, and they go out there and perform it live. I mean, there's a lot of differences.
Well, no, because if you're in a studio, if you're making a motion picture, they get a script and they give it to you and you say and do the things you're supposed to do while the cameras are rolling. There is no difference between being a professional movie or television actor and being a professional wrestler today. There used to be, but there's not anymore. So why don't the boys at least get some benefit out of it? Since the whole product has gone to shit, at least they could get some benefit out of it on the back end of the reason why it's gone to shit. Because there is no difference now between being an actor and being a professional wrestler. I don't think they need to form their own union. I think they just need to join the one that already exists that covers the activities that they are performing.
Well, from what I understand, the Screen Actors Guild would be interested in potentially doing that. You would just need some WWE top wrestlers to reach out and say they want to do it. That's the problem. Not that wrestlers can't get unionized. It's that no one ever makes the move to do it.
That's the first rule that I learned when I got in the business. Because early on when I got into business, I got to ride with Bill Dundee. When in the summer of '83 in Georgia, when he was the booker. And he would explain to me that no matter what, and this was borne out by other veterans, Frank Morrell, all the guys that I rode with, the boys are their own worst enemies, and the boys will fuck up everything for themselves. You go to a town and you get a rate at a hotel that you're in every week, and they give you a rate and they give you a late checkout, and one of the boys is going to trash the room or have a fight with a rat, or somebody's going to be running down the hallway at 3 o'clock in the morning naked, and you're going to get booted out of the hotel. Same thing with a rental car deal, same thing, whatever the fuck, a buffet. And none of the boys can stick together from the famous, infamous time where Hogan stooged events that Ventura was going to unionize the guys in the 80s. Somebody's always, especially, it's going to be the top guys. The top guys they're going to be the happiest, and they're going to be worried about what's going to happen to their spot and or to the company if all this takes place. So they're going to stooge so that they got the promoter on their side and they keep their spot and everybody else gets punished. It's never the bottom guys that stooge, it's the top guys. But always, in any time that the guys have had the chance to get together, somebody's always broken ranks or fucking stooged or just wouldn't go along with it or whatever. And that's always going to be the way it is. But if you ever got somebody with some balls that was doing this because they really enjoyed it, but they didn't have to, and they had some money or other options, and they said, well, this should be fair. Well, then, and, that would be hard to disagree with in this day and age. And you couldn't even got away with it 20 years ago, even in the Attitude Era, because there were still other options and the whole business had not changed completely now. But now it would be entirely doable. It's just that nobody is important, as we've seen. Thanks for coming, Drew McIntyre. You beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, you win the one of the world titles, that used to mean that you were going to have that belt for a long time and that you were in the cream of the crop. And instead of 6 months later, it's, well, we'll put the belt back on Randy. Thanks, Drew. Whatever. It just doesn't. So now no one person is really particularly as valuable as Hulk Hogan was in his time, or as Ric Flair was in his time, or as Buddy Rogers was in his time, or especially as Jim Londos was in his time. As a matter of fact, it's become exactly the opposite of what wrestling and boxing started out as pretty much the same concept, only different rules of a fight. Boxing, gloves, fists, wrestling. The main event guys, the world champion was the most important guy. Whoever might challenge him was the second most important guy, and you had that match and you sold tickets to it, whether it was John L. Sullivan and James J. Corbett or Strangler Lewis and fucking Frank Gotch. Well, they never wrestled each other. Gotch and Hackenschmidt. And the champion got most of the gate, and the challenger got most of what was left over, and the promoter hoped to make a little money. And by the time that Londos was so hot in the 20s and 30s, people were they were running shows on purpose just if they could get him to work for them. And he was cleaning up and making all the fucking money, just like Lewis had and Sheik had and all those names. And then once all the ex-wrestlers retired and became promoters and TV came in, then all the promoters started making all the money because they were all the top wrestlers and they learned all the tricks and they got guys over, and they needed top guys, but they still had first count. So the top guys made real good money and the promoters made a fortune. And now it's become that the promoters really don't make anything unless you're Vince McMahon, because nobody else does either. And the fucking wrestlers are all interchangeable and they're not the attraction. They're just the fucking, the cogs that make the wheels go around. And it's complete. And whereas Mayweather makes $200 million for a fucking fight, Conor McGregor made more money in one night doing a fucking work boxing gimmick than he made in his entire UFC career. And wrestlers, they make little or nothing in the overall scheme of things. It's completely reversed. Boxing stayed the same. The champion and the top guys make all the fucking money, and then the promoters make a lot of money. In wrestling, the promoters make all the money, and then the wrestlers, except for the ones that work for Vince. Wrestlers that work for Vince make a lot of money and not nearly what they should. And everybody else is starving to death. What the fuck?
To finish this off where we started, Roddy Piper, the actor, what did you think of They Live?
I like that too, because not only was it, I like science fiction movies, but it was cool to see a wrestler back in those days in an actual movie or on television, anything other than a TV show. But I liked Ventura's shit with Schwarzenegger too, because that's cool. One of the boys up there, right? Back in those days, we didn't get a lot of recognition at all.
What about Terry Funk and Roadhouse?
That was my favorite was Paradise Alley. But Roadhouse was great, but I just loved Paradise Alley because not only did you get to see Funk, but the whole movie was really about wrestling, and you got to see all those fucking Amarillo clips and Stevens take the upside down bump and all that shit. So my favorite Terry Funk movie was Paradise Alley.
He was also in Over the Top. Remember the Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling movie?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did the song Over the Top.
Sammy Hagar.
Yes, I did a heck of a, not Jake, by the way, but Sammy did a heck of a music video with Flair and Steamboat to that particular little ditty. It's time we make it over the top.
See, there was a good one in UWF for that with Dr. Death and Terry Gordy.
I remember seeing that too.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, very
fantastic. I guess maybe Joel Watts made that one if I had to guess.
Well, you would be correct. You would be correct. Watts actually had Joel, and this would, because Joel was a nice guy, but he was not like a fireball over the top personality. And Randy West, who did the videos in Memphis, was same thing. He was a real nice guy, but he wasn't like an over-the-top crazy wrestling person. He's just, he's Jerry's brother-in-law there, right? So Watts sent Joel up to talk to Randy West to see how they were doing the music videos, because Jared had started doing those. I'm thinking that must have been a fucking hilarious conversation, because here is Joel Watts from Oklahoma talking to Randy West from Middle Tennessee about how that they're basically ripping off MTV ZZ Top videos to get baby faces over, when I don't know that Randy West had ever listened to a rock and roll song in his life. It was hilarious. They were just basically, Jarrett was having all the ideas, and Jerry Jarrett doesn't sound like he'd be the goddamn king of rock and roll either, but he knew what was on television, and Nashville was one of the early places to get cable and have MTV. And he would just show Randy West, here's this ZZ Top video, and he put the VHS tape in and play it, and he go, shoot that with the Fabs. So suddenly Randy West, who'd never done one of these things before, because it never been done before in wrestling, and he wasn't a cameraman. The only reason he was a cameraman is because they hired him to run the fucking camera. So gets the reputation as like he's the goddamn Francesco Scavullo and Martin Scorsese of wrestling music videos. And so Watts sends his son Joel up to learn from Randy, who learned by just watching the goddamn ZZ Top video on a VHS. Oh, it was like they were passing government secrets. Go up there and learn how they're doing these.
Well, Jim, we have one or two more questions, as well as a song or two in equal time, but I want to make sure that we get these in, because so many people have been sending in questions. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount that have been coming in. I don't want anyone to get mad and say that we're ignoring them and sue us for not answering their questions on the air. And that is my awful transition of this week's episode.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're not going to sue us, because we would then respond with the hammer of justice wielded by the Norse god of thunder and courtrooms, the one, the only. Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, even if you have been the victim of a bad segue by Brian Last, whose brain has farted, you too can be represented in court and get your legal remedies, your compensation for if you've been damaged or harmed in any way by calling Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. A plethora of cases that he is currently involved in. Just, folks, so you know, some of these, the time periods for opting into these litigations or being involved in this is running out. He's currently, the new law office currently doing opioid litigation. The folks that have been preyed upon by these big pharmaceutical companies, some of the babies born addicted to opioids, some of the people that have been born that have been addicted to opioids because of overprescription, et cetera, and lack of warnings from these companies. Cases are going to be filed by March of 2021 in opioid litigation. The 3M company made defective military earplugs, and some of our service people got hearing damage. That's going to be filed by next summer. And the Zantac cancer litigation. I actually used to take Zantac like chiclets years ago, and I haven't in a while, and I never will again. Hopefully I don't have to retain Stephen P. New at any point, but if you do, those cases are going to be going into court by next summer. So whether it's personal injury or wrongful death, he does review those cases on a case-by-case basis. But if you have been in some way damaged, infringed upon, or are in one of these groups that have been hurt by these various acts, Stephen P. New and just a little tease, just a little tickle of the taint. Mr. New may even be involved in some cases involving the wrestling industry very soon. Not even with me. I'm trying to stay out of the litigation business here for at least the next 3 to 6 months, but stay tuned for more on that. We may have Stephen back in for some enlightening discussion on some of the happenings in the world today over the next several months.